Hello everybody and welcome to the third video in our series of videos on the parliamentary tradition in Ireland in the 19th century. As always, we begin with our learning outcomes, so by the end of this presentation you guys should know why Daniel O'Connell launched the repeal movement and how it worked. You guys should then know why the repeal movement failed, and finally you guys should know 4 consequences of O'Connell's work. So today we will follow Daniel Connell through his ultimately unsuccessful attempts to repeal the Act of Union that led to the elimination of the Irish Parliament in College Green. So in the last video we saw how O'Connell was waiting to see if the Parliament in Westminster could deliver the reforms that were desperately needed in Ireland. But by 1838 O'Connell was sure that this was impossible, as he decried the passage of the Poor Laws in 1838 that ignored the needs of Ireland. Remember, it was these poor laws that set up the notorious workhouses that would become places of horror during the famine that was to break out in 1845. Really at the beginning of 1840, O'Connell decided to make a much bigger push for repeal. Remember, repeal in its simplest terms meant to get rid of or repeal the Act of Union of 1801 that made Ireland part of the United Kingdom, and it got rid of Ireland's Parliament. He attempted to launch the repeal movement in Belfast, but he found very little support there. The reason for this is because Belfast was becoming an increasingly wealthy city thanks to the development of its industries during this age of industrial revolution. And since the establishment of the Union, Belfast had become richer and therefore didn't want to repeal the Union, which was benefiting them so much. However, O'Connell found massive support throughout the rest of the country. The repeal movement was organised along similar lines to the emancipation movement that he had led in the 1820s. Once again, the peasantry contributed money towards the movement, with the collected money being known as the repeal rent. The movement took a while to get going, but thanks to O'Connell's hard work and support from younger idealists, the movement eventually took off. The most famous aspect or part of this movement were O'Connell's Monster meetings. These were huge rallies that would be attended by over 100,000 people. Reports of the largest meeting at the Hill of Tara on the 15th of August 1843 put the number of people present at close to 1 million people. These meetings were entirely peaceful. Now, peaceful meetings of such an enormous size, these were unheard of in other parts of Europe, and it took a huge amount of planning and organisation to keep these huge demonstrations peaceful and orderly. O'Connell then had planned the largest of the monster meetings to take place at Clontarf in October of 1843. Throughout the year of 1843, he had over 40 monster meetings, and this meeting at Clontarf was to be the pinnacle of the monster meeting movement. However, the British government grew worried at the size of these meetings and feared that a rebellion would break out. So the day before the meeting was due to take place, word came to O'Connell that the meeting was deemed to be an illegal assembly. And O'Connell, remember, who was always keen to stay within the confines of the law so as not to spark scenes of violence, called off the meeting. However, in May of 1844, O'Connell was imprisoned for organising the illegal meeting. O'Connell was eventually released in September. However, the movement never reclaimed its momentum, even though O'Connell did hold large monster meetings in 1845. So why did this massive movement lose its momentum? There are 2 real reasons that it happened. First of all, there was a split within the repeal movement. There was a lack of unity. Whereas the Catholic Association had maintained unity, the repeal movement could not. Remember those younger idealists who helped to drive on this association? They became disillusioned with O'Connell. In particular, there was a group known as the Young Irelanders, led by people like Charles Gavin Duffy, Thomas Davis, and John Blake Dillon. These guys really got people behind it with their newspaper, The Nation, and really pushed that repeal movement. But they were putting in more radical ideas that were now and now they were unhappy at how O'Connell had called off the Monster meeting at Clontarf. They were also very unhappy about the overly Catholic nature of O'Connell's rhetoric, believing that all religions of the country needed to be united, not just for it to be a Catholic movement. The other big thing that stopped the movement reigniting was, of course, the coming of the famine of 1845. We have a whole series on the videos of the famine, and we know the impact that that has had on Irish society, and that came in 1845 as attempts to try to get the repeal movement up again was starting. So O'Connell himself, he died in 1847, never having achieved the repeal of the Union. However, his work had massive impact on Irish society. So first of all, his work, obviously in the Emancipation movement, led to the eventual disestablishment of the Church of England, or of Ireland, or the Anglican Church, from its privileged position. Remember, he got the Emancipation, and now he got the Church disestablished as well. He also, his work in Parliament would go on to inspire people like Charles Stewart Parnell, who we will be looking at in our next set of videos. It showed that you could achieve real reform in Ireland through engaging in politics in Westminster without the use of violence, or rebellion, or war. Also, his pacifist tactics would be seen as an inspiration throughout the world, and that would influence the likes of people like Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King to use similar tactics. O'Connell is attributed with the phrase, "Liberty is not worth the shedding of a single drop of blood," really showing his pacifist ideas. However, there was a pretty negative consequence of O'Connell's movement, which was that as the Catholics became more organised, it pushed their former allies, the Presbyterians. Remember, many of the leaders of the United Irishmen of 1798 had been Presbyterians, people like Wolfe Tone. But the Presbyterians now moved closer to the Anglican Church, fearing that they would again be overruled by the Catholic Church. And this would eventually lead to, as we will see with Home Rule, the change in Irish politics from being about either a liberal policy or a conservative policy to being about whether you were for Ireland being its own nation, being a nationalist, or for maintaining the union with England and being a unionist. And this would be the most important aspect of political life. The other consequence of O'Connell's work was that frustration at O'Connell's tactics and the horrors of the famine led to that group we were talking about, the young idealists, the Young Irelanders they were called, launching this unsuccessful rebellion known as the Young Irelanders Rebellion in 1848. And this would be used as a rallying call for later Irish revolutionaries who wanted to try to gain independence through violence. So that brings us to the end of our presentation. So by now you guys should know why O'Connell launched the repeal movement and how it worked. You guys should know why the repeal movement failed. And finally, you guys should know at least 4 consequences of O'Connell's work, both good and bad. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys got something good from this video.